So since I heard the sad news that Dr. McDougall passed away last week, I've been debating whether or not to make this video. I've always had nothing but massive respect for Dr. McDougall, and it was him amongst a few others that started my fascination with nutrition. So I wasn't going to make any video, but a couple of things changed my mind. Number one, there have been a number of ridiculous cheap shot comments from people outside the vegan community making claims about John's death. And number two, yesterday a video from Dr. McDougall resurfaced on my timeline called "Why Did Steve Jobs Die?" John made this video not long after Steve Jobs died back in 2011. John articulately and respectfully broke down in detail, using evidence and science, the likely causes of Steve Jobs' death. If you have never watched this video, then I urge you to go and watch it after this. You will see John at his very fair, respectful and intellectual best. He made the video back in 2012 as there was a lot of speculation at the time that Steve Jobs' vegan diet had a large part to play in his premature death from cancer. And John being John, he wanted to put forward a more balanced conversation. So from a place of respect and unbelievable admiration, this is my counter at some of the ridiculous statements being made about him, a man who can no longer defend himself. So at the age of 18, while studying at Michigan State University, John suffered a massive embolic stroke. He stated on numerous occasions over the years that he thought this was down to some of his lifestyle and diet choices. At the time of his stroke, John was eating a lot of eggs, cheese, meat and junk foods and burning both ends of the candle. Even factoring all of this in, when John had the stroke in 1965, it was fairly rare for a teenager to have a stroke or heart attack. Around 1,000 teenagers per year across the whole of the United States. Recent data shows an increasing trend in strokes among younger populations, including teenagers. The American Heart Association notes that the overall stroke rate among younger adults, so ages between 18 and 44, has been increasing. For instance, there has been an 11% increase in intracerebral hemorrhage strokes amongst younger adults over a 20-year period from 2004 to 2024. So as I said just now, John had an embolic stroke in 1965. This means that a blood clot or other debris formed in John's body, likely his heart, and travelled through his bloodstream and lodged in the narrower brain arteries, the cerebral arteries, blocking blood flow to his brain. The mortality rate for ischemic strokes, which includes embolic strokes, is lower than for hemorrhagic strokes. Hemorrhagic strokes have a 40 to 50% mortality rate within the first 30 days, whereas ischemic strokes have a lower but still significant mortality rate. Now, it is certainly true that the survival rate from younger stroke patients tends to be better compared to older adults due to better physical resilience and recovery potential. However, the severity of an embolic stroke in a teenager can be particularly high for several different reasons. One, the neurological impact. The brain is still developing in teenagers, and a stroke can disrupt critical developmental processes, potentially leading to significant cognitive, motor and sensory impairments. And number two, underlying health issues. An embolic stroke at a young age often indicates underlying health problems such as a congenital heart defect or blood clotting disorder, which will require ongoing medical management. Now, we know from Dr. McDougall's accounts that not only was he paralysed on the left side of his body for 2 weeks, but he remained noticeably physically weakened for the remainder of his life. For ischemic strokes, including embolic strokes, around 66% of people survive beyond the first 3 years. That is today. Back in the 1960s, it was a fair bit lower. For teenagers, the survival rate tends to be higher due to better overall health and physical resilience compared to older adults. Stroke survivors are also at an increased risk of having another stroke. About 1 in 4 stroke survivors will have another stroke within 5 years, which can impact longer-term life expectancy. These stats are based on today's figures, and again, risks back in the 1960s for having another stroke within 5 years were between 1 in 2 and 1 in 3 people. Following his stroke, Dr. McDougall went on a whole foods, high-starch, low-fat diet and remained on this until his death at 77 a week ago. Now, when you factor in his stroke happened 6 decades ago, the longer-term risk factors for teenagers suffering a stroke and the known physical weaknesses he carried through his life, reaching 77 years old, where the current life expectancy in the US is around 76, I would say that is a reasonable outcome. You will have also heard me say on this channel many times before that your diet is one small piece of your overall potential lifespan. Genetics, exercise, having purpose in your life, stress management, spirituality, and having community. There are many factors that govern how long you may or may not live. Now, there have also been speculations from some that John looked very frail and on the leaner side, and to this I would say maybe. But clearly it is difficult to look at a video alone and make those conclusions. I would say that in his last video before his death, he didn't necessarily look underweight for a man nearly 80 years old. And remember, lots of studies have looked at the weight of older people and their longevity prospects. So for example, 11 studies that included 1,075 centenarians had a BMI range of between 19.3 and 24, with the average around 21. Unfortunately, John didn't progress through to his 90s or 100s, but his weight and BMI looks fairly normal for his age and height, etc., albeit maybe slightly on the leaner side. At some point in the future, the actual cause of John's death will likely become apparent, along with any other health challenges he was facing. I suspect it will be from natural age-related problems or connected to his stroke. But what we all need to remember is that diet is one small piece of your overall health puzzle. Diet is clearly important, but it's certainly not the miracle cure that it's made out to be by some. You can eat a healthy diet and still suffer health problems due to your parents' and grandparents' lifestyles, the amount of stress you are subjected to, having a lack of purpose in your life, and so on. Finally, I think the most important thing for us all to do is to thank John for his life's work. Whatever your dietary preference, we would all agree that he has worked tirelessly to steer thousands of people away from standard junk food diets, and many people will have gained many years in their life expectancy. For me, John is and will always be a rock star. Condolences to his family and friends, sleep tight, and we will see you on the other side.